There's so many great innovators in this industry, and the independents are a very strong part of this region and are really incubators of ideas. And you'll see dine-in cinema and the cinema entertainment center concepts really flourish and grow in this region that CinéShow has historically served.
This is the Box Office Podcast. I'm Daniel Luria, the editorial director of Box Office Pro, the pulse of theatrical exhibition. And in this week's episode, we have a big feature on CinéShow, the exhibition convention bringing together the Cinema United of Mid-America members down in Dallas, Texas this week. I'll be there with my colleagues Patricia Martin and Rebecca Pauley covering the event. We have featuring in this episode an interview with the Byron Berkley Award winner Todd Halstead from the Cinema United team. He is joined by the namesake of the award, Byron Berkley, a very well-known figure here in exhibition circles that is coming up later on in the episode. In our sponsor segment, I interview Alan Fernandez from Christie on Christie's VDR technology and how that is raising the standard of standard, as we like to put it, when it comes to projection technology. Great advancements in this presentation space coming up in the sponsor segment following the interview with Todd and Byron. And in our filmmaker interview segment, Chad Kennerk interviews Alicia MacDonald, the director of Finding Emily, the film coming out from Focus Features this weekend, a romantic comedy that is coming up to close up this packed episode. And because we've got such a long running time this week, I'm not joined by any of my colleagues. I'm just going to be going over the entire news that we got from last week here solo, starting off with a big update on the Paramount Skydance and Warner Brothers Discovery merger. This has been in the books for a while now, but a lawsuit by state attorneys general from 13 states is now in the way of this getting wrapped up. There's also another lawsuit from the Writers Guild Association, which is a completely separate topic that we won't get into right now. But it looks like there's movement here, folks. We got from Cinema United basically a number of points that the exhibition community is coming out and laying out as they are looking forward for more clarity on this merger. We need to have some real direction on where this industry is going. And we already heard from heads of AMC, Regal, and now Cinemark saying, hey, you know what, we need this to get wrapped up. If Paramount's going to be the winning bid, let's go and let's keep on going in this direction. We haven't heard any relenting from the state attorneys general, and that ticking fee is coming up, I believe, at the end of September for Paramount Skydance, which will take a financial penalty in paying out for the delay caused by these lawsuits. In the interim, we've got these statements from Cinema United basically laying out exhibition's position for a successful result to this merger. Now, we need to be very clear and stress here, this is in no means support or endorsement of the merger from Cinema United. Their position remains unchanged, that they believe that successful exhibition industry does not involve any additional studio mergers. This is merely a clarification of the number of elements that should be in place for this merger to take place without any further damage to the industry. I'll be quoting here from a press release provided to us by the team at Cinema United. They are looking for, first of all, a long-term commitment to maintain or expand wide-release theatrical movie production that is supported by a meaningful period of theatrical exclusivity, fully marketed and promoted in theaters of all sizes. Talking about that first point from Cinema United, that is something that we have clarity and basically an alignment from Paramount Skydance. If you remember, David Ellison attended CinemaCon to address exhibitors directly, said that they were looking to have 30 annual releases between a combined entity with Warner Brothers and would give all of them a minimum of 45 days in theaters before, let's say, an extended window, before they hit that subscription VOD window. So at least on point one, there seems to be an alignment. Let's move on here on the list with the second point being provisions, ensuring that the merger will not cause an increase in rental terms so that theater owners and in turn moviegoers do not bear the brunt of the cost of this transaction, particularly independent theaters across the United States. Very interesting sentence here from Cinema United. Look at the last portion of that statement, particularly independent theaters, because what we know coming off of that Disney Fox merger is that film rental got significantly more expensive for everyone, and especially for our independent partners that just don't have the scale to have the negotiations needed to be able to negotiate better terms with those studios on film rental. So that is a concern that I think is still up in the air. We'll have to see if this is still going to be discussion between the major circuits and a major studio, or if the entire exhibition picture is going to be involved. Moving on to the third point, and enforceable safeguards to ensure broad access to films for moviegoers and theaters of all sizes that is not conditioned on requirements that impede movie theater owners from making business decisions that are responsive to their community's preferences and the broader marketplace realities that many theater owners face today. Vaguely worded, but basically here what is clear to me is Cinema United saying, hey, we've spoken to our members, and what we really would like is not being locked into playing the same film in the same theater for 3 weeks when it stopped making money 10 days in. So it's basically a flexibility, or let's say a moving on from the term of playing a film clean on a single screen, dedicating single auditorium or a minimum play window for these films, even when they don't perform. We still have to see where it goes, but again, this seems to be like a lesson from the Disney Fox merger that was very, very hardly learned by this industry in the last 6 years. Finally, moving on to the last point from Cinema United, they are asking for continued access under reasonable conditions and precedents to the valuable and vast film catalogs of both Paramount and Warner Brothers. Guys, this is a very important point because as we know from that Disney-Fox merger, that vault slammed shut. The number of theaters that have access to titles archivally from both Disney and Fox are significantly less or fewer than when Fox and Disney operated independently. That is still a concern for many theaters as they, at least most of them that I know of in terms of circuits, continue putting on repertory films on a programming basis in the off-peak periods and midweek. It might not seem like a huge sticking point. It is the last point here in the list of priorities for Cinema United, but it's still a very important one in the sense that this is not an opening weekend or even a weekend conversation at all. Opening up archival and repertory titles for theaters is a midweek and off-peak conversation to help the business in these quieter periods in the calendar. Those are the points here from Cinema United for this conversation. If it were to be wrapped up, basically as AMC, Regal, and Cinemark have already stated they would like it to be, if this is wrapped up, these are the points that Cinema United is coming out and saying this is what we believe would be best for this industry if this merger were to happen. Earlier this week on Monday, Paramount was reportedly set to meet with Rob Bonda, the state attorney general of California, who is leading that state AG lawsuit against this merger. That meeting canceled last minute over silly reasons. There's really nothing we can say here. Reportedly, the state attorney general of California was upset at Paramount Skydance for what they claim are media leaks. I'm not exactly sure what to read into that, so I won't and avoid that bear trap altogether. But we will be monitoring this situation closely as the weeks advance. To be completely honest, the way it looks to me, especially after these statements were made public by Cinema United, especially after the show of support from the top 3 theater chains in the United States, it looks like this deal is inching closer towards reality probably by October. Looking over at this weekend's releases, we are expecting another number one finish from Spider-Man Brand New Day, which helped drive the best August of all time at the box office here domestically. A fantastic result by the Sony Marvel film, now entering its fifth weekend, and we expect it to end with a $18 to $25 million number one finish in its fifth frame. Fantastic result here for the title. The battle for second place is going to be heated with The Odyssey, Coyote versus Acme, and Insidious Out of the Further, all competing for that 2, 3, and 4 slots. We've got it neck and neck here with Coyote versus Acme and The Odyssey tracking very closely for that number 2 spot. Insidious, we do think, is probably going to fall down to number 4. If you just look at the hold average for all of the Insidious sequels, it seems to be around 63% when we talk about a week 2 drop. And of course, that opening weekend was $25 million for the horror sequel. So we do expect that to finish in fourth. The disappointment here, unless something major happens after we finish recording, The Dog Stars, the latest title from director Ridley Scott, is really struggling to stand out in tracking. That is currently slated to open between $8 and $12 million in fifth place. Disappointing result for a title that we really thought could inject some life into the marketplace. Right now, unless we see some overperformances from every title that we have in our top 5, we are unfortunately looking at an end to the $100 million plus weekend box office streak here domestically. There is a chance we still get there, but this is going to be probably the one weekend where we don't. Thank you so much for joining us here on the new segment of the Box Office Podcast. Coming up after the break is my special CinéShow interview with Todd Halstead and Byron Berkley. So please make sure to stick around after the break.
Are you looking for a personal pizza that packs a pizzeria quality punch? Your patrons are. Increasingly, they're demanding snackable, on-the-go, convenient options like Villa Prima personal pizzas. Made from premium ingredients with freezer-to-oven ease, they help you save time and labor no matter your back-of-house constraints. They even have partially topped options that let you customize and create something totally craveable. Try Villa Prima personal pizzas today. Pizza this good shouldn't be this easy.
And we are back here on the Box Office Podcast speaking with our very good friends and industry colleagues, Byron Berkley and Todd Halstead. Two names that if you're working here in the United States exhibition sector, you must have heard and come across a number of times. And I can tell you from personal experience, every single interaction I've had with both of these gentlemen have been positive. So Byron, Todd, welcome here on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Daniel.
Well, Todd, you are receiving the first ever Byron Berkley Award at CinéShow. So a big congratulations to you. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but this is an award named after an industry colleague that we have right here. And we need to take the opportunity to speak a little bit about your career and your background in the business, Byron. Let's start in the beginning, going back to when you first decided to go into the exhibition business. As we know, this is usually a family-centric business. So from your perspective, how did you first get working into the movie theater sector?
Well, actually, I probably like a lot of young kids, I went to work when I was in high school in a movie theater in my local community where I lived. Grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I started working in a theater when I was in high school and worked in that theater all the way through high school. Got out of high school, started to continue my education, and then joined the Army for a couple of years. While I was in the Army, I ran a small post theater on our post, which was in Okinawa at the time. Got out of the Army and went to work for the Nafee family. If you're familiar with them, they at that time owned and operated United California Theaters, which was based in San Francisco. Actually, that was really United Artists Theater, but they were in a partnership at that time, and they operated as United California Theaters. I worked for them for pretty close to 11 years as a manager in various towns in Northern California. All of these towns were, of course, had theaters that had been built in the 20s and 30s. They were all single-screen theaters. Most of them were pretty large theaters. They had balconies and, 1,000, 1,200, 1,500, 2,000 seats in them. And as I said, I managed a number of different theaters for them over the years. And that's really my beginning in the theater business. I left the Nafis, I think, in about, as I said, about 11 years. I went to work for the Dr. Pepper Company, unbelievably, as a as a theater marketing representative. Somehow or another, they thought I knew something about the theater business, so they hired me to talk to theaters about putting Dr. Pepper in the soda fountains, which I did, and I did that for a number of years, and continued on in the soft drink business by went to work for General Cinema, who at that time operated the largest network of Pepsi bottlers in the country. I went to work for them in their soft drink division, which incorporated Sunkist, Canada Dry, and several other brands. And I worked for them for a number of years as a vice president of sales, left them, and then went back into the theater business. And at that point, I acquired a theater in Texas. I was living in Atlanta, Georgia at the time, moved to Texas and acquired a theater in a small town. That became the beginning of my ownership career in the theater business. I acquired several other theaters from General Cinema. Right after that, they were selling off their theaters in Texas at that point. And that was in 1985, I believe, is when that occurred. So at that point, I became an owner operator as opposed to just a manager of theaters, and take it from there. That's kind of the sum total of the whole thing there. So
That's a really good way of catching up until the last 40 years, where, of course, you were been able to build an extremely influential career in our business. And Todd, you've also been working with movie theaters. You're also known for working as a lobbyist with our colleagues in Washington through Cinema United, before that with NATO. Can you talk a little bit about what drove you on this career path and how you ended up connecting with the movie theater industry?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Daniel. Kind of a roundabout way. Just had always, like so many people, had such a strong passion and love for the movie theater industry, for movies, going to the movies, growing up going to the movies. And I moved to Washington, D.C. after I graduated from college and ended up working on Capitol Hill. And from there, went to work for the National Association of Theater Owners, I guess probably nearly 20 years ago at this point. And it really gave me just this kind of an unusual entry point to this industry that I'd always been fascinated with. And I was able to just see the industry from a broad perspective, working at NATO earlier in my career, and then working with just amazing movie theater owners of every size, from the largest circuits in the world to screen Main Street cinemas. And quickly, just through that process and those experiences, my passion for the industry only grew, and quickly learned that although every operator has different business realities, every cinema is local, and every theater employs people from its communities and serves their local audiences, and contributes to the economic and cultural life of the places they call home. And it's just been a wonderful experience working with folks like Byron.
Well, let's talk about how you guys first met, because you worked together for a number of years, obviously building out CineShow as we know it today, a show that has had a long history as a convention for the Mid America region. But when was it when you guys first got to know each other? I want to start with Byron's first impression of Todd.
I think that's a good call by Daniel.
okay, well, at the time Todd and I became acquainted, I was heading up what was then the Independent Theater Owners Committee within the NATO organization, and Todd had shown a particular interest in the issues that were of importance and concern to independent theater owners. So that was really when we first kind of connected, was within the NATO organization, and we kind of shared a lot of similar beliefs and concerns. And I was very impressed with Todd, and I thought that he had a lot of potential to somehow or another benefit independent theater owners, because he had a particular, I think, interest in their part of the business. And at that point, I was also involved with what was then NATO of Texas, and we were looking. Rain Rabicock was our executive director at that time. You may remember Rain. And Rain had decided to retire and step away from active involvement in the association. And the board decided that we needed to find a replacement for him. And Todd, if I've got the story correctly, I think at that point I contacted you and asked you if you might be interested if the position, became available. And I think your answer was yes, you would. And I went to John Fithian at that time and recruited Todd. John, was reluctant to let him go, but he recognized also I think the importance of having somebody like Todd possibly heading up the organization. And there was some long-term plans in place at that point to expand and form a regional association, including Texas and Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Kansas, and so forth. And this kind of was an area that Todd would be particularly qualified to develop. So that was kind of how we became connected with one another.
That's, of course, the organization now known as Cinema United of Mid America, these collection of
Right.
states in that region. So it's not just Texas, it's a wider swath of states. And Todd, you were instrumental in working with Byron in putting this together. I want to hear about how you first got to meet Byron Berkley on your end.
Yeah, so when I first started at NATO, now Cinema United, the very first movie theater owner I met was Mark O'Meara. And I think he came into the office the first day I started. And he gave me a great rundown. Mark, everybody knows Mark, he's fabulous. And he kind of gave me a rundown of, all of the important independent volunteers in the industry, and Byron was certainly amongst that group. And just kept on, it took me a while to actually get face to face with Byron. I kept on just hearing from everybody about how important his leadership was in the industry. And kind of just, he became a mentor to me, and I think just a mentor to so many other people in this industry, from folks working in studios to working in the movie theaters to, the vendor community. And so just, through all of that work and the advocacy work I was doing at NATO, eventually got to meet Byron fairly early in my career, and just really enjoyed working with him.
You did mention CinéShow a second ago, and I want to talk about that event because obviously you both work together in really growing this. As I would say today, the second most important domestic show in terms of conventions for our industry, following obviously CinemaCon. Now, that's not something that's done overnight. It's an event that has grown, I think, in profile and in capacity over the last decade significantly, but it's not something that's new. Byron, you've been in the industry a number of years. When were you first aware that CineShow, or at least what is now known as CineShow, that was around, and what was your association with it in the beginning?
The origin of CineShow was really with NATO of Texas. It was a small, what we called at that time, tabletop trade show that the NATO of Texas organization started. John Rowley, if you remember him, was the chairman of the association at that time. And the members of the board, decided that we needed a trade show, get everybody together once a year. And that was really the beginning of what later became known as CineShow. At that time, it was not called CineShow, but that became the foundation. And then from there, when the merger of the associations occurred primarily under Todd's guidance, that is really when CineShow became CineShow and a true trade show as opposed to just a regional yearly get together.
What stands out to me, because what stands out to me when I look at Cinema United of Mid America is just the huge concentration of major circuits. You have a big concentration of, let's say, top 15, top 25 chains in that region, but also the independents. A huge, massive number of independents are in that land, in that constellation of states. How did that come together, and how did you sort of find that right balance of making this an event that serviced all these different parts of the industry?
Yeah. So really, when I first started working with Byron, I'd known Byron for several years, but when I first started with working for Byron, and the board at the time was South Central States, NATO. And Byron and his fellow board members had this vision that this region could be more, and that CinéShow could grow. And talking with Byron and others, they gave me the opportunity to come in. At that point, my background had really just been centered on advocacy, and working with Byron and the others allowed me to expand beyond that policy background and become more directly involved in the broader business and relationships of the movie theater industry. And and so through these opportunities, we worked with NATO of Kansas and Missouri and the South Central State region, and we merged them all into a super regional to create efficiencies to increase the advocacy capacity around the region. And through that, we were able then to market CineShow to a broader audience. And when you look at the region that Cinema United of Mid America covers, there's so many great innovators in this industry. And the independents are a very strong part of this region and are really incubators of ideas. And you'll see dine-in cinema and the cinema entertainment center concepts really flourish and grow in this region that CineShow has historically served. And it was working with Byron and others to set up just a more robust marketing of the show, and identifying the programming that is built or was built for movie theater owners. And through that process, we were able to just promote the show and increase vendor support of CineShow.
To add to that, I just getting back for this moment to the formation of what was then Theater Owners of Mid America. Todd was really instrumental in putting this thing together because you had all of these states, each one of them had their own idea of how to operate within their state. They had their own budget, they had different opinions about the business and so forth. And bringing all these disparate units together and putting them into one unit, it was quite an accomplishment that I think Todd can take a lot of credit for because it didn't happen overnight. It took a lot of negotiation, a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions to bring all these folks together into one unit. But I think he can take most of the credit for that. So
Well, I mean, I would say that CineShow, I do appreciate that, Byron. The region, through the work that Rain and Byron and the board had done, CineShow Regional Association, CineShow had already been around for a number of years, but the convention itself had a very strong foundation because of the work that people before me had done, and it had loyal supporters. There's a real sense of community. What it didn't really have at that point when I came on board was the scale of a broader industry participation
right.
that it has today. And the amazing Diane Pfeffer, who now runs CineShow, has done a great job of moving the convention forward. But when I started, the potential was clearly there. Texas is one of the largest movie theater markets in the country, right? And the some of the most important innovative exhibition markets in the country. This whole region includes a remarkable mix of independent exhibitors, major circuits, studios, vendors, industry partners, what have you. And the opportunity was already there to build something bigger, to build on what had already worked, and make the event more useful and give people more reason to attend. And I would say that Byron was the visionary of all of this. He had the vision of CineShow starting in 1998, and the growth that this convention has experienced over the years is due in large part to his work.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about those positive memories, right? Of having built not only this trade association as a regional, but also pushing forward this event that is now a mainstay on all of our calendars. Todd, on your end, what has been some of your favorite moments or anecdotes, even memories of CinéShow over the last number of years?
Probably the single most beneficial experience I've had with the convention is just meeting the broader industry and getting to know all of the industry partners, the vendor community, getting to know folks who work at the studios. It was something that helped my career progress and just become more involved in this wonderful industry.
I think the main thing that I have enjoyed and have benefited from over the years is the fact that we were able to bring all these people together in what ultimately turned out to be a very successful venture. I remember years ago working for a guy who had a thing on his desk, and you've heard this expression before, but no one of us is as strong as all of us. And that was kind of my guidance during the years that we were putting this together. So the real satisfaction I got of it and the real memory I have of it is that we were able to put all these people together, form this organization that now works very nicely and benefits everybody. So that's really, I think, what I got out of all of it.
Byron, Todd, thank you so much for joining me. And Todd, a huge congratulations for being the first ever recipient of the Byron Berkley Award at this event.
Thank you,
I
Daniel.
really
Appreciate
appreciate it, Daniel.
it. Yeah.
The box office has been great this summer, but what about the winter blockbusters? Projector manufacturer Christie showed footage from Dune Part 3 at CinemaCon this year as a part of their VDR demo. Of course, the film looks amazing on laser projection, but they also showed the difference between watching it with and without their new enabling technology called VDR, which brings out the details and emotions in dark scenes, an upper-level contrast that can change the impact of an image. To learn more, visit christiedigital.com/VDR.
And we are back here on the Box Office Podcast with our guest this week, Alan Fernandez, product manager over at Christie Digital Systems. Alan, welcome to the podcast. A lot to discuss here because, as our listeners may know, in the exhibition world, you guys have been coming out with this VDR technology at the trade shows this year, had a big presence with some demos out in Las Vegas for CinemaCon. We know you guys were there on the trade show at Cine Europe. Let's just take it from there in terms of what VDR is to
Sure,
those folks that maybe didn't go to a demo in either Vegas or Barcelona.
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah, thanks, Daniel, for having me. Glad to be here. Yeah, why don't we start at the definition, the straight up definition of VDR, which is variable dynamic range. And just to get it out there right now, it's not an HDR technology in the cinema definition of HDR. So just to eliminate some confusion there, it's slightly different technology, but it sounds pretty self-explanatory. Variable dynamic range, and what that is it's a technology that we've started to release on our latest CineLife Plus real laser projectors, and what it's doing is actually optimizing your content on screen frame by frame. So it's looking at every single frame in real time, analyzing that specific frame, looking at how much headroom you have from like your brightest pixel to your 48 nits, which would be a standard cinema DCP. And then what we do is we actually turn down the lasers, red, green, and blue lasers in a real laser system, and basically retone the image so that it's maintains its creative intent, but now you have a much lower black level floor. So that's a primary benefit. You're going to get a contrast enhancement, especially where projection systems today are most challenged, and that's going to really be in those darker scenes. Like Dune is a really good example. Right, those Dune movies are half the movie is like got an APL of probably below 10 or even 8%, and even the peak luminance in a lot of those dark scenes is pretty low. So this is where VDR technology really shines. And it's using the Christie CineLife Plus and the real laser illumination system. And some people ask, well, hasn't there been some technologies already developed similar to this? And in the consumer market, call it consumer prosumer market, you've probably seen some things like on your television, dynamic contrast ratio or contrast dynamic dimming or things like that, right? And that's in the there's inherent technologies that have been around for a while that try to elevate the contrast experience for at home and prosumer, but they are no way suitable for cinema grade in the sense that there's very visible artifacts and downsides to some of these technologies. Like I have this DCR remote on my my laptop screen right now, and it changes pretty slow. You can see the changing of the colors and the changing of the black level. Of course, cinemas, we have to. The whole point of VDR is that you're not going to see any of those things. You're going to see a better image, and you're going to reap some benefits on the back end. And everyone's been focusing, you're right, on premium format. There's a number of formats. Christie is, really strategized in our close relationship with Dolby and the development and deployment of the Dolby Vision, Dolby Cinema. And there's others of course, the most notable IMAX and other competitors that are out there working on the premium format space. And that really serves, like 5% of the total screens of cinema. What about what about the other 95%? What's going on there? And I think, the industry has really focused on, well, let's just build more cost-effective projectors. But where's the real value add? Where's the differentiation? How are you going to differentiate your theater without having to worry about, well, if I'm going to differentiate, I'm going to have to spend, six or seven figures, and then I'm going to have to get that return on my investment. Then I'm going to have to increase my box office ticket. And that's a pretty tough strategy these days. So by developing a technology where you can you get that image enhancement for moviegoers, which is a big deal, that differentiation. But on the back end for exhibitors, I think it's just as important or even more important, the energy savings that VDR brings to the table. So energy savings, laser lifetime extension, which all will play a big role in the total cost of ownership. I like to joke around saying, everyone knows there's two certainties in life, right? Death and taxes. And the third one is volatile energy prices.
Of
They're
course,
not
that's at
going
the tip
away,
of my tongue,
right?
Alan. I was ready to say, wait, you mean volatile energy? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, but we joke. Exhibitors know that. I think that lands a
Yeah.
lot better at CinemaCon. Is we are just looking at how to optimize our technology and our capex investments better, and that's why I love the way that you're framing this conversation. That yes, it's part of this enhanced movie going trend that we're seeing, but is it directly tied into this capex investment that sometimes you see circuits investing like $250,000 just on one auditorium, right? And if you want to go that road, you can, but there are other ways to enhance your presentation and be able to market that to the moviegoer without having to turn to a significant capex resources to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really just trying to understand where some of the pain points and some of the challenges are today in exhibition and making sure that exhibition stays viable. I mean, cinema's been through well over a century of numerous technological threats and business model challenges, and they've always come on top. And it's not so much because of technology. I mean, technology plays a big role, but I think everyone knows, the social that's shared experience for that movie going experience is pretty magical. You can't replicate that anywhere else. That being said, we have to we have to make images better. We got to drive people into the theaters, and we have to understand what the business challenges of exhibition is today and moving forward. So
And it's connecting with a consumer. I think you said it ago when you said, well, if you're in a consumer level, if you're buying a television, you might be aware of different technologies. You're beginning to see the average consumer, at least on the home entertainment side of things, be a little bit more literate when it comes to tech differentiation, to audiovisual technology. You're seeing it a lot more on a cinema perspective now. And I think that's where that PLF conversation kind of starts. I look back to the release of something like The Odyssey, right? Where it kind of turned into a bingo card of like, hey, I want to see The Odyssey, but I want to see it in fill in the blank. And some of us are kind of like Mad Libs. You just fill in the different premium formats or enhanced formats you want to see it in. And being able to have something as an exhibitor that can connect with that audience base, which is getting bigger and bigger and getting better and better informed, I think is going to be crucial, not only in saying, I'm playing this movie, but in differentiating your theater in saying, I'm
absolutely.
playing this movie in this format. And there might not be another opportunity to see this like this in your town. I want to go back a little bit in terms of how you guys over at Christie developed this, because as we know, you guys have been pioneers in digital projection technology, one of the primary sources that really put us in this digitization conversation that we started having, in the mid 2000s,
Yep.
going to the early 2010s. This is, I think, a significant step forward, a significant innovation that Christie is bringing to the table. How did this get developed from your team?
So that's a great question. I mean, I've been at Christie now 22 years, and there has been some in on the non-cinema side. Many years ago there was something we called the dynamic iris. Right, we were always trying to elevate contrast. I mean, the single biggest improvement you're going to see in any projection system, and it's something that may not understand technology, but the visual enhancement they're going to see, it's going to be contrast. That's the single biggest thing. Aside
Yeah.
from saturated, deep colors and or natural color tones, whatever. Color fidelity is one, but contrast is the single biggest improvement. It's what that gives the image, field of depth. It's what it gives you that punch. It's also the hardest thing to improve on an image for projection systems. So we had this thing. It was probably 20 years ago. Dynamic iris. You're talking about a mechanical iris that's literally opening and closing because you had lamp-based projection back then. And again, timing to the content coming into the projector and enhancing the output, the contrast output. This was more kind of geared towards high-end home theater. So we've always kind of had that in our minds. How can we use digital technology to enhance contrast? The challenge was always speed and processing power. So how can you do it on a cinema package in real time, analyze that, look ahead as well. So you can tune the algorithm for like scene cut detection and eliminate all those artifacts, at 24 frames per second. And really Cinelife Plus was this kind of the operating architecture that we launched 20 Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was like 2018 or 2019. And then the real laser, the latest iteration of laser devices that use fast switching GaN drivers, have allowed us to kind of now we have the building blocks, the tech blocks to make this happen. And then it was a few years of creating the algorithm, fine tuning the algorithm, getting some of the creatives in, right, to make sure that we're pretty confident in early stages. We're not altering the creative intent. We're just enhancing the black level and the contrast available to that system. And we've worked closely with some studios to get some content to break it. And sure enough, we were able to break it and go back to the drawing board. And this year at CinemaCon and Cine Europe was really the first time we got to see it in more of like a commercial release form,
Mhm.
on real projectors with no engineering build. It's a real build, and it's actually here operating in this real live theater. That's why we transition these demos to a real cinema, because it's always challenging. First and foremost, to do demos and CinemaCon at Caesar's Palace and other, having it in a real cinema makes it real. Let's put it that way. So we've always, especially for me, image enhancements. I've been in cinema product management for over 15 years. Image enhancements always been one of the key differentiators. How can we do better? Second is that, how can we do better at efficiency and making sure that we're watching the bottom line of exhibition. So, the technology has evolved to the point now where we could create that today. So I'm happy that it's here and it's working well, and we've just released it on a couple of models right now. So we're kind of slowly releasing it to the market, making sure all the small kinks and bugs are worked out. And we'll have kind of a deployment strategy where we'll have all models in the Real Laser portfolio with VDR available to them by let's call it early 2027.
That's you look at that time frame, and you mentioned earlier that you've been at Christie for 22 years. That's basically the lifespan of digital projection, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
more or less the time frame that we're talking about. And when I talk about digital projection, obviously phase 1 or 1.0 was Xenon. Let's
Yep.
go from analog to digital. We know how difficult that was. That was a big lift. A lot of things came in there. The VPF came in. That seemed like just the biggest mountain to get over. Once we got past that, let's say the last 10 years or so, as you well know, has been going from xenon to laser and seeing how that transition develops, how that footprint expands. What you're telling me right now with this time frame for this video technology, and you see a lot of these, let's say, enhanced contrast, enhanced visual presentations technologies using the laser infrastructure, this is that next phase where now that laser is more or less a reality, now that we can say, hey, laser's here to stay, how else can we innovate? I love that we're right in the beginning of that conversation and we're able to come up with exhibitors and say, hey, this is what's available to you. So, in the spirit of that conversation, and I know you've already brought up some of the benefits that this VDR technology can bring exhibitors, but can we focus a little bit more on that? For the exhibitor, what would you say are the major advantages to bringing in VDR to their cinemas?
I guess first and foremost, it always comes down to the big question is, well, you got this great technology, where am I gonna get content? Well, the great thing
Always.
about VDR, well, it's
Right.
always the first, right? And then, well, who's gonna pay for it? Who's gonna
Right.
that conversation can get pretty complicated. But that's the first question. I think the biggest benefit with VDR is you're not buying a new projector. If you've already got a Cinelight Plus Real Laser projector, you can use that projector you have. But most importantly, you're playing it on the content that you're getting today. You're not getting a special format. It's not a special format. There's no VDR format. VDR is a call it a technology enhancement for that projector to basically play the play that content as best as it possibly can with the with the technology we have today.
Can I dumb it
So
down a little bit? It sounds am I wrong in calling it a software upgrade? Because it
it's a
sounds a
software
little
upgrade.
bit like
Yep,
that.
it's a software upgrade. Yeah, and I say that with an asterisk. There's a couple models, maybe a couple harnesses or something we change it, but it is a software upgrade. It's not a You're not buying a big piece of technology that you're gonna have to try and figure out how to monetize it over the next 10 years. It's a simple software upgrade. We have right now, different options, but right now it's a perpetual license. You buy a one-time license fee and you get it for life and you use it on your projector. And the second benefit is, real laser projection systems have been very efficient. If you look at a lamp-based projector, you're like 3.5 to 4 lumens per watt. So how many, wall plug watt, how many lumens you're getting on screen. Real laser was at close to 15 lumens per watt. And now we're adding another 15% energy savings on top of that. So now you're getting close to 17 lumens per watt. You're getting 4 to 5 times more efficient than lamp-based projection. And we've been proud of the energy efficiency. That's what we've been really driving for since the inception of Real Laser. And so you're getting when you start thinking about, you know, 30, 40, 50% better efficiency than, let's call it, the next leading competing product, but 4x from what you were with lamp-based projection. Every little bit counts. Like you said, 20 years. We see projectors. There's tons of projectors that are still operating after 15 years. Everyone thought the lifetime was maybe closer to 10. But the reality is, if it's still putting a good picture on screen and there's nothing if it ain't broke, you don't fix it. But of course, every exhibitor has their own strategy on how to refresh and upgrade their technology. But that's really it. So it's no special content, big savings on the back end in terms of energy savings, and you compound that over 15 or 20 years. You can't ignore that, obviously. And then also there's a laser lifetime extension. We talked a little bit about lasers early on. Lasers, they've matured a lot in the last 4 or 5 years. The first 5 years, there was still a lot of evolving, new packages coming out, different efficiencies. Now you don't need chillers. Now we're now at a state where laser devices are very mature specifically in the projection
I
side of the
remember the
business.
first laser projectors that came out. They looked like to be the size of a studio apartment in Manhattan. I mean,
Yeah.
they were massive. They had the price tag to match. The way that technology has just sort of advanced and allowed these improvements has been incredible over the last 5 years, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and energy savings on those first laser projectors, there was no such thing as energy savings. They actually consumed more power than lamp-based projection because you had complex chilling systems to keep those lasers at the right temperature so you'd keep your color fidelity, right? So it was a totally different conversation. Huge price tag, no cost of ownership benefit, really. It's probably the other way around. But you had the image enhancement. Now you could get into better contrast, better, wider color, kind of open that door, right? But we're 10 years in and we're a completely different world now with laser projection. So yeah.
No, it's been a fantastic evolution as we talk about this technology. And this is really part of that next step. Now that laser is in, now that laser is here, how do we continue improving? How do we keep on setting that standard higher and higher? Now, let's talk about the moviegoer, because, of course, everyone is in right now improving their projection, improving their sound, improving their cinemas. But you have to finish that loop by marketing this to the people paying for the ticket. Is there a website where moviegoers can find this VDR technology in a theater close to them?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. We do have a website. It's www.christiedigital.com/VDR. And we'll be expanding that landing page to kind of show where all the VDR, the known VDR installed sites are. So you'll be able to go to that landing page and see where, if there's one near you. I'm hoping that in a short period of time we'll have numerous VDR locations because it's a pretty straightforward upgrade, like we talked about earlier, straight software upgrade. I think we have about 4,000 projectors that are VDR capable in the field now, and of course, every projector we're shipping today that's PRGB is also VDR capable. So we'll be tracking that christiedigital.com/VDR for your
Well,
reference.
that's where I'm gonna go to see where I buy my ticket to watch Dune Part 3. I don't know if you looked at that footage at CinemaCon. Looks great, by the way, but it's definitely going to need that great enhanced image and those sharp contrasts to help out. And before I forget, what's that? The Matt Reeves Batman movies. We're gonna have to wait, I think, till 2028 for the next one. But this is where your technology shines, for the lack of a better word. You see those movies with the wrong sort of setup in an auditorium, you're going to miss half the action because it feels like you're watching it through sunglasses sometimes, right?
That's right, exactly. That's actually a great analogy. It's all about the movie going experience. You have to, you want to kind of keep that sense of immersion inside that storytelling throughout the full duration of the movie. And as soon as you get to really dark scenes where projection systems struggle, and like you're saying, you're kind of looking at it through sunglasses, or you're not seeing any detail. You see kind of like more of a flat gray. Even
Mm.
something as simple as a fade to black in a scene cut where you're in an action scene and then you fade to black, you fade to gray, you kind of get momentarily pulled out of that sense of immersion. So it seems simplistic, but actually creatives should take that pretty, that's a really important piece of the creative intent. So I think anything we can do to minimize the risk of being pulled out of that sense of immersion is something that we want to work towards avoiding that. And I think that's a big part of where VDR helps enhance the projector challenges in dimly lit screens, really kind of offering more available dynamic range to those scenarios. And when you have really bright action scenes, your eyes can only perceive so much and sense. If you've got lots of specular highlights and fast action moving scenes, those that's going to be less perceptible. Those really dark black levels. But yeah, those certain scenes, Dune 1, Dune 2, that's we ran those demos with the Dune clips because it was I mean, it kept the theme intact and Dune 3 coming out later this year. But I mean, that's a perfect example. You get movies like that where it's not just a couple of dark scenes. You're talking about 20, 30 minutes of continuously dark, really dark segments of the movie. That's a big piece of that storytelling segment. So using technology to optimize that is critical in my view.
It makes a massive difference, especially for the moviegoers. The director, when they're putting these things together, they have the best technology in front of them in their editing suite.
Yeah.
They know what it's supposed to look like, but making sure that vision is available at a multiplex level to the general audience, that's the missing piece, and that's exactly the work that you guys are doing over at Christie. Alan, thank you so much for joining us here on the Box Office Podcast.
Appreciate for having me, Daniel. Thank you.
And a big thank you to Alan Fernandez from Christie. And now our final segment here, our filmmaker interview, as we continue promoting all the titles that need a little bit of a push, a little bit of help here in getting the word of mouth out there. You know that we are big fans of romantic comedies on this podcast, and my colleague Chad Kennerk is going to be speaking to Alicia MacDonald, the director of Finding Emily, movie coming out this weekend from Focus Universal, that is coming up after this break.
I'm so glad that Focus is bringing this film to theaters where it can be viewed communally. It is a story about making connections. What has it been like for you to share the film with audiences?
It's been it's been absolutely insane. I've never done this before. Putting my tiny baby movie out into the world for people to watch has been the most wonderful thing because that's, as a director, of course, that's the ultimate dream, but it's also the most surreal, bizarre, raw, vulnerable, existential, overwhelming experience at the same time. But top line, amazing. It's a lot though. It's a lot on the heart and soul. But I love it. I think, and I'm so thrilled that it is, as you say, being seen in cinemas because I think, as you say, people really love the communal laughing experience, and I love in cinemas when people like gasp at certain moments. Well, I've been in the cinema watching it with people when they gasp and when they laugh, and it's just the most exquisite thing to be in a room with people responding to it positively. Is what it makes me feel less mad. Like you make this thing that you hope is is funny and interesting, and then when people seem to agree, you're like, oh, cool, maybe I'm not insane.
Well, and at a certain point, the rom-com stopped focusing first and foremost on just being a great film and started becoming these big kind of sparkly streaming concoctions. Other than creating great ones like Finding Emily, how do we get audiences back into the habit of seeing them in a theater?
I'm open to suggestions. Because I totally agree. I totally agree. I think these films are really important for humanity. There, I said it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
because I think we really need to see people falling in love. It does something really primarily positive to us, and seeing people, I think also these films, where else do you learn? Because they all pretty much have the same message, which is that, love should be fun and funny, and friendship's really important, and miscommunication equals chaos and despair.
Right.
And but then vulnerability and honesty are the ways to, if not a happy ever after, to the start of a happy ever after. And how vital and amazing is that as a message? And
Mm.
I agree with you that, they've become shiny and glossy. And so therefore maybe the message gets lost because we're too far away from connecting with the people doing it. So
Yeah.
I think it's that. I think it's the realness. And what I really wanted to do is I went back to, the best decade is like, it's sort of 1989, which is When Harry Met Sally, to 2001, which is Bridget Jones. And everything in between is 10 Things I Hate About You and Clueless and My Best Friend's Wedding and My Sleepless in Seattle. And those ones were real, felt like real people, human
Mhm,
beings just trying their
mhm.
best. And I think that's what we loved then, is it felt soulful because we could connect to them.
Yeah.
So I think more of that maybe.
All of the hallmarks, I would say, of the great rom-coms are in here. But it also feels like a conversation that you're having with the genre itself. Some of them have, in the past, have had a lot of morally questionable, situations. And so in working with Rachel, how did you, or when did you realize that you had to sort of tackle those inherent tropes head on?
I think from the beginning, I think because I was, when I came to this, I think a bit of a cynic because of all of the previously mentioned shiny rom-coms. I was like, I don't want to make one of them. And that sort of seems to be the fashion at the moment. So I was like, let's really interrogate why all of these tropes are here. Like why they're running, why the meet cute, the grand gesture, what are they all serving? And for me, it felt like with a lot of the less successful rom-coms, those tropes are there, but the characters don't seem to be there doesn't seem to be
Mm,
a reason for the character to do it. It's just doing it because the
right.
movie calls for it. So I was like,
Right.
why are these people behaving the way they do? And how can we breathe new? And it all came from character, basically. So I just did a lot of development with the characters. So I added, because I wanted to understand, again, in the realness of it all, like, why does Owen do this? I felt like I needed a specific reason for him emotionally to go after this girl the way he does, which wasn't there in the original script. So I sort of added this element of him grieving, because I felt like when you're grieving, you want so much for something to go well. And I think we all have the human tendency
Mm,
of, when something good seems to come into your life, when everything else feels really hard, you go, yeah, that, and you
mm,
latch on. So it felt like, yeah, grief and love are kind of two sides of the same coin. And so it felt like if he
mm,
had this other thing going on, that it made more sense to me, is why he latched on to Emily the way he does. So it was that. It was lots of character development, and then added the idea of him having to sell the house. So that's another stress, and that's another reason why he kind of behaves the way he does. And then the same with Emily, adding her, what is her relationship like with her parents, and why does she behave the way she does, and the Tristan relationship, what happened there, and just working out also how they are similar to each other. They're both like quirky and in the same way, but they just don't know it. So everything came from character, basically. I came in and just wanted to understand more, because I thought that was the way forward to make it feel real, was to make them feel realer as people.
all of your work, from commercials to shorts to your feature, in some way there's a subversion of expectations. And I'm curious if that's intentional. The incongruities, humor definitely comes out of that, for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. Thank you for saying that. I think you're right. I think I always like to push the first idea, I guess, the sort of the obvious. I think it's just because God, it's so weird looking back on your work and thinking like, why do you like the things you do? Why do you
Sure,
sort of,
sure.
yeah. And I really like comedy. I think it's really vital for us. I don't know why. Like my parents aren't particularly funny people. I didn't grow up in like a fun, like, I think I just, I think it's such an incredible thing to laugh with other people. And I'm
Mm,
fascinated by if you can make someone laugh psychologically or sort of almost like molecularly in that moment, you have their undivided attention because it's such a vulnerable thing to laugh
mm,
that if you can make someone do that, then you can also get a message across without feeling too earnest. I think people hate to be lectured, so well,
mm,
I do anyway. So I always like comedy and satire specifically for being able to sort of get a message in or say something without it feeling too earnest. I like to play with expectations. I think that's just because I want it when I go to the cinema, I want to be surprised. That's all I ever
mm,
want.
mhm,
Someone
mhm,
to surprise me, make me laugh, make me cry, feel something. And so that's, I think, always what I wanna do. Where I always get I always get told off for bringing up death because I bring up death whenever possible, and, I think life is really short, and
yeah,
so why do the expected?
mhm,
You can
mhm.
try and not.
We all need more of that, right? We all need more
I think so.
optimism.
Well,
Yeah,
I think also you have a responsibility. I've realized in this process, you have a responsibility if you're gonna ask people to spend 2 of their precious hours on this earth watching a
yeah,
thing that you made, I feel a real responsibility to, yeah, to not just serve them up what they already have seen or know and to be entertaining, to surprise them, to try and
mhm.
make them feel something because that's what I want. So
I feel like a lot of the great rom-coms, the moments I'm actually thinking of are 2 shots where they're interacting in the frame together, and there's a lot of them in here, so I wanted to ask about that, if that was also an intention on your part.
100%, and thank you for noticing it. Yeah, the 2 shots feels like the kind of the main thing. Me and Rachel, the DOP, had a lot of conversations about style because I wanted it to feel quite traditional in lots of ways. You know, they're young people, but hold them in quite traditional sort of frames. You know, the older romantic comedies, It Happened One Night and His Girl Friday were a huge influence for me. The way that they're always in a two shot and they're always like sort of so quickly saying their dialogue and there's so much chemistry there. And When Harry Met Sally, the two shot was a huge thing for me because I think also you just create this feeling of like, oh my God, what's going to happen? As soon as you cut, every time you cut, the audience, it becomes aware of the storyteller, it becomes aware of the master puppeteer who's telling the story, which is
Mhm,
fun in some ways. But if you can suspend their disbelief for a second and make them feel like they're just watching real life and they don't know what's going to happen, then
mhm.
that's everything.
I'm curious, you started out assisting Mike Leigh and lots of great directors. What did you take away from those experiences that perhaps turned up here in your first feature?
Because I work for lots of different directors, I feel like I'm a real sort of mash of different styles. Like when I was assisting James McTeague and the Wachowskis on a show called
Mm,
Sense8, that was sort of early doors. And I remember starting to pay attention then to like, why did you put the camera there and what, and you know, what sort of what's happening. And I guess I guess it's a real mash. With Mike, it was actors and his sensitivity and his depth of character and using actors to help develop the characters as well. You know, I spoke a lot to Spike and Gary and Jack and reworking the script to make it feel real and make them sort of be part of the process. So yeah, Mike, I definitely learned a lot from actor wise and I guess it was just a general confidence in sort of trying to do it. I don't know. Look, it's
yeah.
funny because at the time I just was like, I actually really liked being a director's assistant. It's a great job. You get to travel and it's really interesting and you're in every meeting and by their side and it's a really fun job. And it was the sort of slow process of osmosis that I was like, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can give it a go.
I've heard you talk about your soul being stirred by a film. What's an experience in the cinema with an audience where your soul was stirred?
Solving stirred. Oh God, I'll have to think. I mean, I guess to be honest, when I saw Hamnet
Ah,
in the
yeah,
cinema last year, I mean, talk about soul stirring.
yeah.
It felt like exorcism. I was howling, and yeah, that really got me. Like, I think it got everyone, but yeah, that I mean, it's a different thing to what I would want to do. Like, I want people to laugh, but also the way that she made people feel then
Mhm.
was unbelievable.